sure where the 60,000 for the program is coming from. Is that the Cdbg, the 60,000? Is it still from last year that we were working on? Okay.
I'll try to catch you.
Let her know that that is it.
Usually it doesn't affect me, but I didn't know. Yeah.
No, we're talking about 60,000.
Yep.
That's when it's got changed.
Yeah. But that's the old one we've been with.
Yeah, because the amendments, the action plans.
What do you mean they're called? Wouldn't they be in the files? No, but you had to send something. You had to send something, right?
Good evening, everyone. It is 6:00 p.m., so at this time, I will call our special meeting to order for May 25th, 2022. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Dennis.
Here.
Buckingham.
Here.
Rivera.
Here.
Washington.
Here.
Walker.
Here. And we will move on to final passage of bills and resolutions. Up first, we have final passage of bill number 34.
And that was a bill introduced by Queen of Washington on May 18th. An ordinance amending the 2022 budget by appropriating revenue and expenditures for the HIV prevention program for both the state and federal funding.
Move for vote.
It has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments from council?
None. No.
We do have Health Bureau here. Would you like to say anything in regards to any of these resolutions? All right. Any questions or any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
And that is Dennis.
Here. Yes.
Buckingham.
Yes.
Rivera.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes, that is so ordered. Moving on to final passage of bill number 35.
And that was bill number 35, introduced by, I'm still catching up here, which was introduced by Queen of Washington at the May 18th meeting of council, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget for the Bureau of Health by appropriating expenditures for the Healthy Moms and Healthy Babies Home Visiting Program grant renewal in the amount of $275,000.
Move for vote.
It has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments from council?
None.
Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Dennis.
Yes.
Buckingham.
Yes.
Rivera.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes, that is so ordered. Moving on to final passage of bill number 36.
And that was bill number 36, which was introduced by Queen of Washington at the May 18th meeting of council. An ordinance approving the transfer of funds in the 2022 budget for the health to comply with an approved budget shift for the Healthy Moms and Healthy Babies Home Visiting Program grant by transferring the total of $21,021.56.
Move for vote.
It has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments from council?
None. No.
Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Dennis.
Yes.
Buckingham.
Yes.
Washington. Rivera.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes, that is so ordered. Moving on to final passage of bill number 37.
And that was a bill introduced by Queen of Washington on May 18th, an ordinance approving the transfer of funds in the 2022 budget for the Bureau of Health to comply with an approved budget revision of the Substance Abuse Prevention Program Prescription Drug Monitoring Program by transferring a total of $51,435.44.
Move for vote.
It has been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments from council?
None. No.
Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Dennis.
Yes.
Buckingham.
Yes.
Rivera.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes, and that is so ordered. Up next, we have an introduction of a bill amending the 2022 budget.
So introduce.
Bill number 38, introduced by Queen of Washington, an ordinance of the Bureau of Housing Services requesting an amendment to the 2022 budget by appropriating revenue and expenditures for Cdbg and home grant funding, reflecting changes of actual allocation amounts for the Department of Public Works, Cdbg administration, and home administration and general projects.
And that is an introduction, so it will sit until our next legislative meeting. And our final item for this special meeting is a resolution authorizing a lease agreement with the Pennsylvania American Water Company.
So introduced.
That's resolution number 69, introduced by Betsy Buckingham. And Council President, I will read in the corrections that were made from when the agenda was originally published. And then I will ask at that time for a motion to approve those, okay? And so, whereas in connection with the Pennsylvania American Water Company purchase of the City of York Sewer Authority, PAWC desires to lease approximately, and that's changed to 3,250 exclusive square feet of space plus 1,200 non-exclusive square feet of space within the sewer maintenance garage. I'm not sure that that part is right. Oh, that is, it is, okay, is that part right? I just need, yeah, I'm not sure, okay, let me look at the updated one. Please just give me just a second here, folks, I just want to make sure that the corrected language, you just give me 1 second, people. If anybody wants to sing or anything like that, go ahead.
Today's National Tap Dance Day.
Oh, there you go, do something. All right. Let me see here. Sorry, folks, give me just a second here. I have, that's all right, I can find it here, because I know I posted it. All right, and I just want to look at the agreement real quick, just to be sure that I have the updated language correct. I'm not sure about that additional space, so that's what I wanted to look up here. Okay. Okay, it's not an additional, it's just a total of 3,250 square feet. So I'm going to remove that additional part there. All right, so let's do this again. All right, so that's resolution number 69, introduced by Betsy Buckingham, whereas in connection with the Pennsylvania American Water Company's purchase of the York City sewer system, PAWC desires to lease approximately 3,250 exclusive square feet of space within the sewer maintenance garage, service garage, located on the property at the intersection of Tornita Street and Access Drive into the York wastewater treatment plant. And whereas the initial term of the lease shall run for a period of approximately 5 years, and whereas PAWC shall pay the City of York during the term a base rent of, and that's changed to $3,412.50 per month. Now therefore be it resolved that council hereby authorizes the city to enter into an agreement for same. Is there a motion to accept the amendments?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor, yes?
Yes.
Opposed, no? Okay, I'll hand it up over to you.
Are there any questions or comments from council?
Yes. Why is it approximately 5 years? Instead of a specific lease term?
Oh, Don, I believe that Jason said because we have to wait for when that sale is actually final. So we don't know the exact date. You know, it could be a little less than 5 years.
So it will be,
possibly.
but the date will be reflected in the final lease when the sale goes through?
Oh. There we go. I believe that is correct, because we're not leasing it today. So you can't pass a resolution saying
Oh,
today.
Right, but the actual date,
It's going to be a
And the final lease.
five-year lease.
yeah, okay,
Correct.
thanks.
And are we still on schedule for May 27th?
We are?
Okay. Great. Any other questions or comments from council? Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Dennis.
Yes.
Buckingham.
Yes.
Rivera.
Yes.
Washington.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes. And that is so ordered. And that was our last item for the special meeting. So this adjourns our special meeting for May 25th, 2022. And at this time, we will move on to our committee meeting agenda. At 6:11 p.m., I will call this meeting to order. And these are committee issues for our legislative meeting scheduled for June 7th, 2022. First, we are addressing our general committee. So we have a presentation by Ms. Lettice Brown, our MS4 coordinator. I don't know if there's something else that goes with your title, but welcome. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lettice Brown. I am the MS4 coordinator for the City of York in the Public Works Department. I do have the slides here if anybody needs a copy or if council would like a copy. Did anyone get the copy? I did print those out. I'm going to go through my slides pretty quickly in the interest of respect of everybody's time. I can talk about stormwater all day, so I'm going to try to keep it short. If I start talking too quickly, please somebody wave and I'll slow down a little bit. But like I said, I don't want to take up everybody's time. So this is my short agenda. I'm going to explain what MS4 is and why it's important, what it includes, what it does not include. Also take a quick look at the permit that is requiring us to do these things from the state and try to explain that a little bit. A quick look at the minimum control measures as well, which are basically my job description and what I'm responsible for every day. Go through some best management practices so everyone's kind of familiar with what they are and the responsibilities of some of our property owners in the city as well in doing inspections. Some illicit discharge examples so everybody kind of looks out for what things we can and cannot discharge to our MS4 system, meaning our streets, creeks, and storm drains and things like that. And then some flooding projects, collaborations, personal achievements, and then some important contact information. So first, what is MS4s? Well, it stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. It's a mouthful. But basically what it means is that our MS4 system, our stormwater system, and our sewer system are completely separate, and they should not mix. The MS4 includes driveways, parking lots, impervious surfaces, our infrastructure of stormwater pipes and inlets and things like that are included in this umbrella of MS4. Also, so why do we care? Well, we want to make sure we take care of our environment, and we are also required to do this by the state. So we want to make sure we be good stewards to the earth. An illicit discharge, I'll give a definition for that. It's basically anything that's not comprised of all stormwater, except for an allowable discharges list that is given to us by DEP that are allowable. Everything else should not be discharged to our MS4. And I'll go into that in a little bit. So this is just a graphic here to try to explain what an MS4 is and why things are separate. The graphic on the left in the middle kind of saying that your toilets, your sinks, your showers, they all go to our wastewater treatment plant to be cleaned and sanitized before they go into our creeks and streams. Our storm system is completely separate. They go into a separate piping system that actually discharges, as you can see on the far right, which is called an outfall, is basically a discharge point of the collection system. When it rains, they all collect and go to a discharge point and outfall. Now those pipes, the water that goes through there is not cleaned, it's not sanitized, it's not filtered. So everything that goes down our drains goes straight to the creeks and streams. Quickly, our our NPDES permit stands for National Pollutant Discharge and Elimination System permit. Our current cycle is running from March 16th to the 2021 through March 15th of 2023. Normally, our permits are 5 years, but there were some issues with our pollutant reduction plan between DEP and our stormwater consortium. There was back and forth about comments that were made for our pollutant reduction plan. So it kind of took a little bit of time, especially with the pandemic, to get that passed. But we finally got our new permit, and that runs through 2023, March 15th. We also have an annual reporting cycle, which runs from July 1st to June 30th every year. And then our reports are due September 30th. So that is my reporting period. I have to have everything done between those two dates, and then an annual report submitted to DEP by September 30th of every year. A quick look at minimum control measures. Again, this is what I call my job description. This is what I do on a daily basis. Public education. One of the reasons why I'm here tonight to educate our public about my program and about keeping pollutants and things out of our stormwater system and keeping our streets and creeks clean. I also have flyers here at City Hall. I have the students out from the schools. We get them in the creeks. We get them finding fish and frogs and organisms and giving them information about why it's important to keep our water clean. Public involvement as well. We do have some cleanups that we invite the public to join us. We normally have a cleanup in the spring and fall, which we need to get back into now that the pandemic is kind of slowing down a little bit, but we might make sure we do it safely. But we also have a Willis Run cleanup coming up on June 26th. We're going to be working around George Street and kind of going upstream and downstream, just trying to clean out all the clutter and things that have been dumped in the creek in conjunction with the Watershed Alliance of York. So come on out to that, put it on your calendars. Illicit discharge detection and elimination is basically the meat and potatoes of my position. If I get a call that someone had accidentally dropped paint on the ground, I want to make sure I go and educate them on how to properly clean it up. We don't want to use water, and we want to use some kind of absorbent like kitty litter or sand to try to coagulate it together, make a clump, and then just kind of try to get it into the trash can. Things like grease, grass clippings, oil from automobile accidents can all be illicit discharges. The second part of the illicit discharge detection and elimination is doing the outfall inspections. So that outfall that I had shown in the second slide, those all need to be inspected by me once every 5 permit year cycles. So we have about 350 of them, so it does keep me busy. But they have to be at least looked at, and there's a form that I fill out on my iPad that kind of shows that they're in working order, they're not clogged, and they're good to go. MCM4 construction site runoff control. We have a memorandum of understanding with our York County Conservation District. They go ahead, and if we have construction or reconstruction in the city, they make sure the erosion and sediment control plans are sufficient and signed off on. They do the initial inspections. If they find any issues with sediment leaving a construction site, it now becomes an MCM3, which is when they will call me and say, hey, we have an issue here. I need you to go investigate. Tell them they need staked fiber rolls or silt fencing or some kind of cleanup to make sure that their sediment is staying on their construction site. After the construction is complete, we have post-construction stormwater management systems. Those are the best management practices that I was speaking about earlier that we have on certain properties. They are basically filtration systems, infiltration systems, trying to keep the water infiltrating instead of running off into our creeks and streams to try to reduce the volume of our runoff. And I'll get into that in just a couple minutes. And then finally is pollution prevention and good housekeeping for municipalities. Basically, I'm telling the public to do these things. I want to make sure the city, as a city, are doing the same thing. Make sure our salt dome is kept clean, our facilities are kept clean. We have spill response kits that we have our secondary containments on our chemicals that we use in the city, and just making sure we are good stewards as well. Okay, getting into the best management practices, we have about 125 of them and counting in the city. Every time there's a construction project, sometimes they are required to put in one of these BMPs. It can be anything from a rain garden to an infiltration basin to a hydrodynamic separator, underground storage tanks. It's a whole bunch of things that are different that come from a BMP manual. And they're to be inspected certain times per year. Each BMP has a different inspection schedule. So some landowners have some of these BMPs on their property. So every month I send out an email or a regular letter, say, hey, your inspection is due this month. Please fill out this simple inspection form to let me know that you took a look at it, cleaned it out, repaired it, whatever you need to do to make sure it's in continuing working order. And then every 5 years or every 4 years, I'm also supposed to go inspect these to make sure they're doing their inspections. I don't want them to just fill out the paper and say, hey, I looked at it, when it could be in disrepair. So I go through and also inspect them as well and give them a pass or fail. And those inspections are included in our annual report as well. Going through illicit discharges, grass clippings, my arch nemesis. Please, please, please keep your grass clippings out of the street and off the sidewalks. It's not only dangerous for pedestrians and bicyclists when the grass clippings get wet, it can get slippery. But during the next rainfall, they flow down to our storm drains and they clog them, and then we get flooding in our intersections. People's basements get flooded and they get upset. So we want to make sure we are keeping our grass clippings out of the street. Sewage is also another one. We understand things happen. Sewage pipes get backed up. It starts flowing onto the street, but we want to make sure folks know how to properly clean it up. We want to make sure we're using absorbents and not washing it down with water. So whenever we see a sewage leak, give me a call, and I'll give you that information too. And I'm going to skip through that. You have that. Cement and concrete cutting, which is also called slurry. When they're cutting, saw cutting in the street or on the sidewalk, they have to use water for their saws, and sometimes it runs down to the inlets. We want to make sure that they're using inlet bags or some kind of sandbags around to try to keep that yucky stuff out of the storm drains. Motor oil and grease. Sometimes when we have automobile accidents, I'm called to those. If we have a big spill of gasoline, antifreeze, oil, anything like that. Grease as well. Sometimes our restaurants' grease traps are overflowing. We had a big problem with that with McDonald's for a couple years across the street here, but they got everything under control now. But grease does happen, as well as cooking grease. We don't want to put that outside. We don't want to dump it in your grass. You don't want to dump it down a storm drain. You want to put it in your trash can. And also sediment can also be an illicit discharge. If you have a large amount of sediment coming off of your property, it again clogs our storm drains, and it also goes into our creeks and streams and can cause cutoffs, which also causes flooding. And then I have just some pictures that I have taken over the years, grass clippings. It looks horrible. Imagine all that grass going down into the storm drain. It's going to clog it up. We're going to have people stalled out in our intersections when we get these heavy rainfalls. So please, please keep your grass out of the street. I apologize to anybody eating dinner right now, but sewage, if you have a weak stomach, please turn away. But sewage is really bad. Of course, it has harmful bacteria. When it's going across the sidewalk like that, you have to clean it up as soon as possible. You have people walking through it, baby strollers, bicycles, pets are walking through this, and then you go in your house. It's very disgusting. So we want to make sure people are addressing these very quickly, as it's a public health hazard as well. Cement and concrete. This poor car got doused with some kind of concrete that fell off of a truck. So it created quite a mess. So we want to make sure that we're taking care with having things on trucks and things like that, and washing out their utensils. If they're washing out their utensils, like on the picture on the right, it just kind of makes an ugly streak down the street, straight to the storm drain. So we want to, if we see any of that, we want to make sure we give me a call as well. Motor oil and grease. On the left side, that was from a van that leaked oil onto the ground. Just So any kind of sand or kitty litter, if you have it, just put it on there so next time it rains, doesn't go down to the storm drain. And on the right side there, that is actually some kind of grease, some kind of cooking grease that has been accumulating in that inlet for years. It was blocked, completely blocked. Nothing, no stormwater, no rain is filtrating through that. So of course it creates a big puddle, and people were complaining, so we got that cleaned out. Sediment can also be a big problem. I've seen a lot of sediment coming off of people's properties. We had a sediment issue going into Kiwanis Lake on the very right there from an outfall when it was actually actively raining. It was not intentional, but I did find the source, and they corrected the issue. But sediment can also be a big problem. When we have flooding events, they're becoming more and more prominent. We had one last year and the year before. I had a lot of complaints about streets or basements that haven't flooded before. For example, on Arch Street, they're complaining, our drain's clogged, our drain's clogged, and I go and I look and the drains are completely clear. I'm like, hey, they're clear. So what happens is the outfall that you see on the right is along the banks of the Codorus Creek. When the Codorus Creek rises and gets very, very high, it's gonna make that flap gate slam shut so the water from the creek doesn't go back into the city. Kind of think of it as a backflow preventer. So when that shuts, no water is going to drain. So yes, it is going to flood, but at least you're not getting an entire creek into your street. Some more flooding photos from last year. This is our biggest problem area, Roosevelt Avenue and Route 30 that everyone has heard about. But again, it was absolutely awful. I was scared for the people that had to drive through that. Thankfully, I think only 1 or 2 people got stuck, but turn around, don't drown. Let's remember that. So, some projects that we have, Poorhouse Run in Veterans Memorial Park. These are pictures before the restoration. On the picture on the left, that's tree roots that you're seeing that was washed away from the banks. If I were to be standing in the middle of that picture, the banks would have been 2 feet over my head. Yes, it was very, very bad. The erosion was just astronomical. And you had trees that had fallen over the creek, as you can see on the right-hand side there. This is what it looks like now. Beautiful, picturesque. We have grasses and trees that are now growing on the banks. That's going to hold those banks in. And in the picture on the right happened after the floods that I had just shown you. The creek actually rose within its banks and did not flood the park. That was our main goal, was to reduce flooding. You could see the grasses were laid down due to the rushing water, but there was no well, maybe a little erosion, but the erosion was less. It didn't flood the park. It did what it was supposed to do. So we are happy that it's a successful project. And we are also doing that with Willis Run now through Lincoln Jim Gross Park. We hope to do the same thing. There is extensive flooding. There is extensive erosion. So we're hoping to regrade those banks just as we did in Veterans Memorial Park and try to do the same thing there. We'll go past that one. Another project, our Street to Greet program, is doing very well. We did win the Governor's Environmental Excellence Award this year for this project. We got to go to the banquet as well. We have 17 drains painted downtown. We're hoping to do 3 more this year, as well as revitalize a couple that have faded over the years. We want to redo those as well. And I am creating an Adopt a Storm Drain program as well with our STEAM Academy. The kids are working really, really hard. We are getting ready to do a PR campaign for that, so we hope some folks out in our city will be our pilot and adopt one of the 10 that we started with throughout the city, and hopefully to grow the program. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these, but I can't do my job alone, so I have partnered with so many companies and people. Just some of note, Center for Watershed Protection has worked with us on several projects. Working Lands is also working with us on the Willis Run project. Penn State Master Watershed Stewards, Watershed Alliance of York, Penn Future, and the STEAM Academy, just to name a few, have all helped us make this program what it is today. Some personal achievements. I have completed the Pennsylvania Climate Leadership Academy. through the Association of Climate Change Officers. It was tough. It was kind of like being in school again. You know, we had exams, that kind of thing. It was free to us if you're a municipal employee, so I went ahead and took it. I'm kind of studying for the overall exam now to actually become a climate change professional, so I'm hoping to get that maybe here shortly. And how is this going to help your city? Well, our climate is changing, and I want to make sure York City is ready for these climate things that we have. I did find our City of York Climate Action Plan report that we actually have. Sorry, I only have one copy. But we have an action plan report that was done in 2016 that got our baseline greenhouse gas emissions inventory. I kind of want to take that on and try to redo it and make sure that our municipal greenhouse gas emissions and our community greenhouse gas emissions are separate, so we as a city can figure out where we can reduce our emissions and become climate ready, because the rainstorms are getting worse. We all see it, so we want to make sure we're prepared. I also completed training for a certified floodplain manager with FEMA PEMA. I'm also preparing for that exam, so a lot of studying going on. But the goal is to become a certified floodplain manager. It's going to help to mitigate our flooding, our property damage, and assessing our damage when floods do occur, and ensuring that we have proper flood insurance rates for our residents. It's a big deal as well. And I also completed my recertification as an MS4 inspector this year as well. And that is my spiel. So any questions, comments, concerns? I'm free for questions. Just a quick note, those are important phone numbers. That is my cell phone, my work cell phone number. If anyone needs to ask a question or needs to report an illicit discharge, it is open and free. I'm on call 24/7. Or my email address if you have photos. Those are very helpful. If you cannot get a hold of me, there is a DEP emergency number. It's a number there that is found. It's a 1-800 number. A live person will answer your call. Just give them as much information as possible, and they will basically do the same thing I do if I'm, for some reason, unreachable or not able to respond to an incident. So thank you for listening. I'm open for questions.
Great job.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Sorry, I spoke really fast.
So I have a couple of questions, but so do you partner with the riparian buffer restoration projects in some of the parks that you mentioned? Does your conservation what is that?
Your conservation district?
Do they help? Do they help? And
Yes.
Or who else helps with that? I didn't know.
Yeah, so the one in Willis Run, the Conservation District is actually being our sponsor. They're going to handle the financials for us. The city provided the land. They're doing the financials. And then Working Lands is the company, the engineering company that is doing all the studies, that is going to actually do the restoration. They'll contract that out to an excavation company. And they're going to do the BMP maintenance for several years.
So I also am aware that Pennsylvania is part of, I think it's 5 states that tie in with directly with the Chesapeake watershed, and we all have goals to meet by,
2025.
2025. Pennsylvania is sorely behind the other states.
Yeah.
So, and I'm thinking that when we ignore our illegal discharges, all that does eventually flow into the Susquehanna, which flows into the Chesapeake Bay. And contributes overall to that pollution. So
yes, a lot of the requirements that from what you're talking about is nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. So yeah, so every especially that sediment factor, we're severely behind in sediment. So we want to reduce our sediment. So yeah, everything that goes down our drains, we want to make sure we keep limited. Yes, absolutely.
So you talked about grass clippings.
Yes.
What about falling leaves? Or do you include both of them? And why the difference? Because I thought falling leaves would be a hazard as well.
Yes, falling leaves are, honestly, that is an act of nature. There's not too much we can do about that, but we can really hope that our residents will just kind of turn the mower around and point it the other way so they don't have all that work to do to get it back out of the street. But fallen leaves, that is one of my pet peeves as well. I just try to tell people in the fall, and I have actually door hangers for that when they do put their leaves into a pile for pickup is that they leave about 6 inches from the curb and their pile of leaves, so that stormwater does have a chance to pass through without picking up all the leaves or it becoming blocked because of the leaves. But if they naturally fall or debris from the tree, a lot of the times as I'm driving by, I'll look down and I see green and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's grass, but it's actually just debris from the tree. Not much we can do about that, but you're right, it's pretty much the same thing. So maybe down the way, I don't know, what are we gonna do? You're welcome.
Well, thank you for taking the initiative to take these courses for certifications.
Yes.
So for, I think you mentioned the PA Climate Leadership Academy. That one
Yes.
was at no cost, but is the FEMA and PEMA, is that certification at cost for you? or-
I think I did have to pay for the training, but and then the exam was included in that. And then if you have to retake the exam, it's like $85 or something like that, which I was just gonna pay on my own.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Got a couple items. One, where is the state on requiring us to pass the car washing issue? I know
knew that was
I
gonna
know
come
that
up.
that is. I know that it's coming.
Yes.
And I want people to know right now, since we're talking about this,
Yes.
that this is something that is coming. That is a state mandate. Nobody here is leading the charge on this, but there is a charge, correct?
Yes.
So what's happening?
So basically what that is they have when that new permit came out, they revived their allowable discharge list. And on the list, it actually reads that residential car washing is allowed if cleaning agents are not utilized, is the exact terminology. So you will no longer be able to use soap or any kind of
Detergent.
yeah, any kind of detergent when washing your cars. Now, we have a 2022 model ordinance, and I believe it has to be passed by September 30th, is what I want to say.
So that is something that will be coming to committee for you to discuss more, but it's a mandate from the state.
yeah,
So
it's
there's
an ordinance
not
change.
much that we're going to be able to do about that.
And I made the edits to model ordinance, and Jason Sable has it, and he's looking over it. He just asked me for it last week to send it again. So he's looking over it and making sure it's all good before we bring it before council.
So council will have to review that and.
Yeah, since it's an ordinance changed, yeah. Yes,
So in other words, you're not allowed to wash your cars outside.
on the
With-
street.
With soap.
With soap.
And this
Yes.
is not gonna come before council until September, but it's summertime, so people are already starting to wash their cars outside.
Well, I
Yeah,
wanted to
there's-
that's why, as part of the
Yes.
education process here, I wanted to bring it up today.
Okay.
Yes,
And so,
so, yeah.
and so how are we gonna get the word out, is my question. And do you need help with that?
I don't know. I'm going to try to push it as much as I can through, if I need to put a press release out, I can type one up and get one out. Just, oh gosh. Then he'll yell at me. No. No, but I'm hoping to do, once I knew it was in motion, I want to do that. I didn't want to do it prematurely and then people get angry if I'm not stopping people from doing it right now because I can't, because of our ordinance. That needs to be changed first. But I've gotten a lot of questions about that, yeah.
And then a second item, a major contributor to the nutrient pollution in urban areas, I believe, is pet waste.
Pet waste.
And I didn't see that one on your list, so I wanted to make sure that we brought that up. It is illegal.
Right, it's there.
It's illegal to allow your pets to do their business, so such that it would flow into a stormwater, basically anywhere.
Anywhere.
So please, just a reminder that anyone with a pet, you must, by ordinance, clean up after your pets.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's not fertilizer, it's not good for your grass either, if you leave it on there. It's a misconception, but yeah.
And thank you
yeah.
for the great job
Thank
you're
you.
doing.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions for anyone? All right. Thank you all so much. Have a great
Thank you.
evening.
All right, up next we have HARB discussion. So I believe Councilman Rivera?
Thanks for being here.
I'm Craig Zumbrun. I live in the city, and I've been the chair of the Historic Architectural Review Board for the city for the last few years.
Thank you for being here with us. I do have some questions. And I had some last week, but I think big enough for 5 people, is that right?
We have the opportunity to go up to 9. We currently have 5, so we're 4 short.
Okay, thank you, sorry. My mic wasn't on. And so, I've never had the pleasure of being informed about HARB. I've heard a lot of horror stories and negative stories about HARB, and I certainly don't want to minimize the work that you guys all do, because I think your heart's in the right place. It's just, I do have some questions. My first question is, what was HARB's opposition to the initiative by the baseball stadium? Just a curious question.
Well, we could also parallel that to the other development proposed on the opposite side of the street. We have, in this case, 13 separate historic properties that were all included in the city's original ordinance, and which was accepted by the Commonwealth to create the historic district for the city. The applicants in both cases failed to be able to have an engineering report that deemed the properties unsafe. That's been a criteria we've always kept, that demolition of a resource, of a historic or architectural resource, would not be something we would recommend absent a declaration of a building being unsafe. We did have that at the former Philadelphia Cafe about 2 years ago, and we did recommend to the council approval of demolition of that building, albeit a very unique building. It was one of the very few clapboard wooden structures that had a long history of service to the city as first grocer and later as a very popular regional restaurant. But we did recommend to council demolition of that. The applicant in the case that we discussed last week had come with 2 different engineering reports, both failing to identify that the buildings were unsafe or unsound. Therefore, we had no reason to believe that it was a prudent decision for the city to go forward with a demolition. The other thing that it failed to do was there was no development proposal. There have been instances where a developer is committed, financing is lined up, architectural drawings are presented that prove that the new development will comply with what is required under the national guidelines, under the Secretary of the Department of Interior standards for new construction. We didn't have anything like that. There was a sketch of a highway commercial type of future development possible, but at this point, the properties will be demolished and there'll be nothing there except grass. Our job as members of this board for the city are to recommend ways to preserve, enhance, reuse historic and architectural resources of the city that we're so unique to have. I've been able to advise cities all across the Commonwealth and traveled to all of those while I was with the Department of Community Affairs as a supervisor for housing and regional community development. York, by far, has the most dense resource of architectural and historic properties, but we're losing them at a very alarming rate recently in the last 5 years. And it's a long answer to a brief question, but when you take 13 historic structures, 4 of which had recently, within the last 40 years, been heavily invested in by a very prominent city developer, it just didn't seem to make sense. There was discussion that this was to be a new gateway. Well, the new gateway as proposed, and now I'm going to put on my planner hat, was really a highway commercial type of proposal. Nothing to do with an urban project, nothing to do with the kind of development that you would find as a model development in any of our neighboring cities. And so that was another reason as a board we could not see the merit to the proposal. I hope that answers the question.
It does, and thank you. Thank you for that response. Has there typically been a liaison from council to HARB or no?
There
Diana?
never has been in my 26 years of experience. There has been the requirement by ordinance that the city's building official is on the board.
Okay. And last week you mentioned that there may have been a paid member or a liaison from the city, from the administration?
We have had a history as a city of hiring a consultant who has the qualifications to advise on both architectural and cultural and historic aspects of each proposal that comes forward. And in the past, those consultants would provide a pretty good workup, and they would document the history of the property, its times of change, and would make a recommendation against the Secretary of Interior's standards as to the applicable changes being appropriate or inappropriate, and we would use those to help frame questions for the applicant. And sometimes, and I would say in the last 5 years, frequently, we're able to negotiate with the applicant to make subtle changes to make the application acceptable. And I'll give you a typical example in front stoops on major thoroughfares. I'm talking Market, George, King, Queen. We would see applicants wanting to go to Lowe's and buy, an aluminum railing system. And we were able to explain to them why that wasn't appropriate, the dimensions weren't appropriate, the material itself wasn't appropriate, and that there were alternatives that could be put in place that would give a lot better life to the improvement. And generally speaking, people didn't realize that and appreciated the application, or rather the opportunity to amend the application so that we could recommend to council an amended application and we'd go forward.
How do you appoint the people on your board?
Council appoints, people can volunteer, and they do that by presenting a letter and a brief resume to the city clerk, and that then is transformed into an actionable item for council.
Does the administrator make, the administration make these recommendations or no? Okay, okay. Do you have any people of color on your board?
We do not. We have reached out. I've personally asked people I know who I think might be interested and might have qualifications. Right now, it is very hard to find people who will step up and make the commitment. 2 meetings a month, sometimes lasting a while. I would love to see people who are representative of the city population.
Indeed, because what I see, and I could be completely wrong, is that in those areas where the historical area is designated, which is mostly the downtown area, right?
The district is large.
The entire city is historical, but I think
No, the district.
the district
The
that you're
city has an ordinance that defined the district, and the
Okay.
district basically follows the main spines of the city, both North and South George, East and West Market, and then it goes out to Philadelphia Street. To the south, it goes, generally speaking, to King, Duke at times.
Okay.
Pine is included. It's an irregularly shaped map.
But it includes some areas where some of the population that live in those areas are mostly black and brown and poor, right? Is that a fair assessment? And so I've probably 3 occasions I've looked up, heard glass fall from the top window on one occasion. I've asked the owner or the tenant there, why is their 3rd floor space open to the elements? On 2 other occasions, I've had a couple of owners complain to me that the standards of HARB are so stringent that they're not able to afford to be able to put it back to and they could be lying, I don't know, to put it back to a historical. All I'm saying is, do you find yourself, do you think that the standards are extremely stringent to those that may not be able to afford it, to be able to go back to a historical home, as opposed to them knowing that they could come to council and appeal to council to be able to do something different?
I'd like to answer your question in the way you asked it. I think in my memory of the last 5 years, we have not had any applicant who has not shown a degree of willingness to work with us on the proposal. The situation that you describe with a third floor window not replaced, whether that's an owner's issue or a landlord's issue, and I can think right now of a number of properties near where I work that are in those conditions. That's failure to maintain. And often maintenance is an easy solution. Reglazing a window. There's materials that can be used like automobile Bondo, but it is made for wood restoration. That's a polymer that will go in there and take rotted wood and make it solid. You place the window back in, and the repairs cost very little money. People are just not willing often to do that.
Okay.
Dennis Kunkel, who was here with me, who's the vice chair of the board, has given people step-by-step instructions of where to go to get the material, how to do the work. He'll even offer at times to go by and give them some advice on site. So I don't believe that what your question implied is accurate at all. And that's not, to me, a problem with HARB. There was a time when I was on the board 25 years ago, and I've not been on the board consecutively for 26 years, but when I was here originally, and the city had a different attitude about its history and heritage, and some of the members were really stalwart about never bending on a technique or an approach to repair. Those days are long gone.
Okay, no, fair enough. And that's why I asked you to come here, because I had a different mentality of how HARP operated, and I wanted to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. And I know you guys have a hard job to do, and it's based on the recommendations by the Secretary of the Interior, right?
Right.
So, and those are non-binding, right?
Those are national standards which the city bought into when it passed the original legislation to create the district and to have it done under the guidance of the State Historic and Museum Commission. And the reason that a city did that, the reason York did it, the reason Harrisburg did it, the reason Lancaster did it, is because of municipal pride in leaders' recognition that these are irreplaceable assets that, while time in office allows, you safeguard that for the future. And you provide an incredible financing tool for potential developers who will take a building that's been abandoned and be able to use historic tax credits in a historic district and have a leg up against a municipality that doesn't otherwise care about history and heritage and the fabric of the city.
Well, thank you. Those are the questions I have.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, I still have some questions. Hold on. I was just waiting for council.
Okay.
There are, though, ramifications for not following the Secretary's guidelines, are there not, regarding funding availability, things like that?
There are, and there is a loss of resources that will eventually tip the scale that'll create a decertification of the district. And when it's to me analogous to taking the nails out of an old wooden boat. If you take enough nails out of the boat will sink. And that's what reckless demolition, to me, ultimately is pointing towards.
Thank you. Yeah, so it does have direct funding implications to the city of York to have a pattern of not following the recommendations of HARB. I believe in the past, both Councilman Nixon and I had made probably one of the, we kind of made a certain push, and it was on a garage that was hidden from sight right up the street here that was in the HARB district, but I personally knew the structure as not being particularly sound or historic, in my opinion. And we did make that choice of allowing someone, we went against the recommendations of HARB. But I do think that, again, that was kind of an out of sight, out of mind garage building, not a historic facade. But I did, when I was on council, propose legislation or was working on legislation that actually categorized kind of a level A, level B, level C kind of prioritization so that we would have a better understanding of what we were trying to protect, such that if there was a building that had a significant history as well as structural value, that would be a Class A, and that would get the most dogmatic or most specific preservation, that basically nothing could be done unless that was done, or unless it was followed to a T to maintain it or to return it to being a historic building. Then the second was maintaining most of the, I'm trying to remember exactly what it was. It was most of the fabric of the building. And then the third one was when something was in such bad shape, like we had the ones on Susquehanna Avenue, I remember. They were again kind of out off the beaten path. And you could say, take pictures of these now because the things were in such bad shape that it was really either going to be fixed at all or not fixed, and you end up with the demolition by neglect kind of thing, which is a very big concern about HARB. And how we implement that, because we have no rules really to stop demolition by neglect, correct? Particularly internally. So if you are not working with individuals, and I'll be honest, I looked at the properties at the baseball stadium yesterday, and it's demolition by neglect. I'm watching it rot right in front of me. I don't know if there's something, I mean, you already approved, and I agree with those buildings coming down because I think there's a greater economic development value there than the value of those buildings. We can disagree on that, but that's my opinion. But that is what we push people into, is demolition by neglect, if they feel that HARB is being too strict. I'm not saying where or when that happens, Craig, but those are kind of the options.
Well, if I could respond to that.
Yes.
It's not a question, but you threw things out there, and I think it bears some discussion. The city has numerous ordinances that address building conditions. And if they can be rigorously enforced, I believe property owners, in some cases, can come around to see that they need to make repairs or at least stabilize the property. In the case of the properties in front of the Ball Diamond, it's, to me, hard to imagine how you as council look at another publicly funded entity, owning them and letting them deteriorate to the condition that they deteriorated. All they had to do is follow the city's own guidelines for securing properties, which they failed to do. And they're rewarded by being allowed to demolish. And do you know that one of those buildings is in paintings that the city has from 1820, which means they're at least 250 years old. And therefore, well, I can prove it to you. I'll send you the photo tomorrow of the painting. So the question of benign neglect is, I think in this case, not benign. It's very intentional neglect. It's devious neglect, and it's neglect by an entity with public money behind them. For homeowners or tenants who have a condition that is an urgent condition and they come through the building department, we have never said, no, don't do the work, ever, that I can recall. And I challenge Steve to say we're wrong about that. So I know we get painted sometimes as the villain. We don't get paid a cent for our volunteer time. And we're only trying to do what the ordinance and what the original city government ordinance says, which is to advise council on matters related to changes to historic and architectural items that are within the district.
And I definitely didn't, I mean, I'm with you 99% of the time. It's just sometimes economic development has to be weighed in there as well. I did want to just address the consultant because some things were, I didn't feel the characterization was exactly proper. Some comments that were made to council at the last meeting. I believe that HARB is familiar with the fact that their consultant did not renew their contract. The city of York did put out an RFP to try and get a new contractor for HARB, and we got 0 responses. So it's not like we've been twiddling our thumbs over here. We did make an effort to try and get a new consultant. And at the same time, we were on a parallel track that has stalled a little bit, but I've discussed it with Director Watson to kind of reamp that. But there was a concept to bring this expertise in-house into a housing professional that would be inside the Department of Economic and Community Development, that would have combined things like the historic knowledge as well as lead abatement issues and other things that all tend to fall under that department. So we've been looking at multiple ways to try and support HARB in the face of the fact that there was nobody willing to step in and fulfill or to fill a contract that we had put out there. So I just wanted to clarify that we continue, and we will be putting out another RFP, even though the last one got no response. We'll put out another RFP, as well as Director Watson moving forward with her staff to see if we can bring something in-house. That was being conducted under, and a discussion with Historic York, who was the prior consultant, was going on with Planner Pritchard before he left. I think that is one item that kind of got overlooked with his departure. And so we are going to be checking back into that and seeing if that relationship, they were an incredible consultant for the city of York prior to that relationship ending. So if they would want to rebuild, they would have to rebuild capacity to do such a thing. And for that, I think that they would need some kind of serious commitment from the city, from the council, and from the mayor's office, that they won't build up the resources to do something and then have the rug pulled out from under them again.
Greg, I'm curious as to why you didn't share this with us last week. You want me to repeat myself? Craig, I'm
think
curious as to why.
Because it was on our written record that went to council.
But when you came up, you didn't share it.
Well-
I think it's really important that you share these types of things with us. I'm not saying that it would have made a difference on our vote. I'm saying that, that information
Yeah.
coming from you
Right.
and pleading with council is important.
It was the written recommendation from the meeting,
Yeah.
what I stated. I went into a little additional detail about, from a planning, that's not really historic architecture, but it's a planning perspective, that the discussion about a new gateway, I think if you had any certified planner on staff, they would tell you that that's really a highway commercial kind of proposal for a suburban neighborhood, not a city.
Again, we appreciate the work HARB does. I know it's a hard job and it's a thankless job. And I don't think you're perceived as villains. I think the perception for me is that everything's black and white and there's no gray area. And in 2022, when people are struggling and to fix their homes and things like that, but I get it. I get you have a job to do. I feel as though, you know, this is the first time in what, 2 years that I've been a councilman that you've addressed council, and so I really wanted to find out more about what HARB does and the reasons why you take the stances you do, and so I appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you. We used to have a annual meeting that was held at the museum on Market Street, and we invited all council members, and the last council member I can remember that attended was Genevieve Ray, so that's how long ago it was. But we would review the entire year with a slide of each before and after, and it was a good opportunity to sort of pat ourselves in the back as a city for how we were upholding the original ordinance's intent. I'd love to see that happen again, but we're volunteers and we don't have the resources to do that, to host that, to put it on, or even to maintain those records. I thought that the city had a grant from the Museum Commission that, you know, would help do that, but I don't know if that was now lost for a failure of submitting the paperwork at the close of the initial grant. But there are dollars out there to chase, particularly for this and for those kind of professional services. Thank you.
I don't want to beat this is a dead issue because I'm tired of talking about it. But as far as the HARB properties, I remember when Joe Musso was on council, he has suggested that there be a pool of money or something, grants offered to homeowners who buy properties in the historic district to be able to help them to make the renovations to maintain that property. And when they can't afford to maintain it, then that's when the properties start to neglect. And then after years and years of them not being able to fix the problems or in accordance with the Secretary of Interior's guidelines, then you end up with these properties that end up in major disrepair. Now, I agree, and I love the fact that we have historic preservation because I love historic buildings and historic structure and things like that. But, you know, when you have the average Joe like me, if I wanted to buy a house, the mayor's house, I couldn't afford to maintain that as much as I could, as much as I'd like to, because I couldn't keep up with the Secretary of Interior's guidelines. So I know the issue has been that the people who own these properties, I'm not talking about the big name people that probably could afford it, but the average person like me who wants to have that property, move in there and find out I don't have $12,000 to replace those windows. I have 6, but I don't have 12. So now what do? I can't replace them. So the issue is, you know, like I said with Joe Musso, he talked about it would be great if we had some kind of fund that we can help these people close that gap so that they can make these repairs. So I don't know if that's something that ARPA money could be used for, but I'm just putting it out there. Okay, I'm done. I'm ready to move on to the next thing.
Can I just, real quick, I hate to belabor it,
But
It's
you are-
fine, it's committee discussion.
I think Mayor Helfrich probably knows, and Craig will agree, that I have not always been the most stalwart supporter of the HARB. There was that perception that you brought up, that HARB is, it must be this way, this is the only way, it's our way or the highway. And quite frankly, years ago, there were members of the HARB board that reacted like that. I saw HARB members say, I don't care if you can afford it, that's your problem, it's not ours. When they came to me and said that, hey, you're the building code official, you have to be appointed to the HARB board, I went, really? Because I still had that perception, and we have to understand that perception is reality. I don't know how we change that, but I can tell you that in the short time that I've been on the HARB board, every meeting that I've attended, the board members have engaged with the applicants and gone back and forth, and Dennis Kunkel particularly is always able to say, well, hey, maybe you could do this or this instead of this, it might be a little more palatable. So I think there is that huge misconception. I think the HARB members aren't, you know, as stiff and rigid as people think they are or they used to be. The other issue I think that we have in this city is, especially when it comes to the brown community, the people of color, the folks who aren't economically well off buy houses or obtain properties that are in the Harb District, and they have no clue. They have no clue until they come to Chief Buffington and say, I want to replace my windows. And I have to say, you got to go before the Harb Board. And I don't know if we can do this or not, but I think there should be consideration given to amending the ordinance to require some type of disclosure by a seller when they're selling a property within the Harb District. So at least these folks know what they're getting into. Yes, so good on him, because, you know, not everybody, I'm out shopping for a house, especially, you know, I'm buying the best I can afford. The last thing I'm thinking about is what Harb requirements might be down the road that are going to cost me extra money. Preserving our history is important. I think we have to have a good balance. I think you have a Harb Board right now that tries to strike that balance. Yeah, we voted against the George Street thing. I just don't feel like it was a well-presented package. I don't think it serves our historic interest like it could, but I also understand economic development. But I just wanted to say that there is that perception still out there, and that perhaps we can help folks by at least letting them know what they're getting into when they're buying a house.
And I want to add to that, if I may make a comment, is we need to have a conversation with Racp, because that realtor, the seller's realtor should have that included. And I don't know if they have a specific disclosure for that, but that's why you have a realtor, to see you safely. It's not to tell you about a school district, it's not to tell you about a neighborhood, but it's to safely see you through a transaction. And that disclosure should definitely be part of it.
But if I'm the seller's realtor and I tell you that, it might sink the sale.
I
That's
thought,
right, but that's the legal responsibility. I mean, that's an interesting conversation. I'd be willing to open that conversation up. with
Yeah,
Racp.
well, that's, when you make that comment, that means that people are just going after the dollar versus trying to be honest with the person that's buying the property. So that's the real issue that we're looking at this moment. And I agree that needs to be in there, because like myself, a person that's looking to buy property, I want to know up front what I am looking at versus going blindsided, not being told up front because someone's trying to get a commission, and then on the back end, when I'm trying to make repairs in my property after buying it, I cannot do it because then now I have to come before you guys. So it's all in being honest from the beginning to the end. That's really what it is, and there's no other way around it. We just have to make sure, whatever we have to do, to make sure that's in there. Moving forward, making sure that those things are there.
just to be clear, last week we were presented with a document that stated that sellers had to disclose that information. So I think we would need to look at ways to possibly enforce it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Absolutely.
our role, but the partnerships with the RAAC, as you were saying. But we were presented with a document last week by Craig, by Dennis Kunkel.
And I want to add that the Racp does have, and I know because I originally developed the program for realtors, a specific designation for selling houses in the city. And this definitely should be included in that. If it is, I mean, I know it was, we included people from permitting and zoning originally in that program, but that's definitely, and I think, you know, that we all know and we appreciate that a lot of the attraction of people coming to York from out of town is our incredible architecture, and we have a lot of thanks to go to Harb for helping to maintain that over the years.
Betsy, was that a requirement that was these other things working with Racp? Because I seem to recall that about 9 or 10 years ago, we looked at including it or making some kind of requirement to include it in a deed or something, and it wasn't in our purview.
Oh, I don't know, I'd have to ask, I don't know, I don't know.
That's what I recollected, because we're repeating history here.
History
you know.
repeating
Yeah,
itself.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. But it's a conversation I would have anyway, just to explore it, but it's,
Looks like we have two. Come on.
Manuel Gomez, resident of the city of York. I feel compelled for a few reasons. Myself, I'm a big fan of HARB when it's actually black and white, believe it or not. I don't like them when they're dealing in exemptions and waivers that I think those least connected and most disenfranchised elements of the community don't know about, don't know how to reach for, and don't even know that they exist. Big deal with me is there was reference made to the brown community. It's going to be us Latinos, the largest demographic, not just in the city, but also across the county. It is a wave, a massive influx, not just here, but even if you compare statistically where we are versus other parts of the nation. Guess what? They don't know anything about HARB. Because it's an overlay district, a lot of times, whether it's zoning or HARB, those are the two big ones. They'll come to zoning. You know what? They're flipping their lid. I bought this, they told me it's this, and come to find out it wasn't originally zoned for a specific use. The other one is HARB. There are definitely inflated costs when you purchase in that overlay district. We can't just wave that away. With all due respect to Mr. Zumbrun, they do unbelievable work. Their expertise is always, to me, seemingly endless. But it is definitely a barrier. It is a barrier to entry for many. What you can do on the educational side, you have some key stakeholders, Shauna Tarasso, Mr. Unger with Tenfold, of course, Shauna with Racp. We just had a wonderful symposium. They do a lot of educational work. How much they can partner to help folks know when you're buying in the HARB district, what it could mean, it's to be seen, but it's definitely an educational component that is missing. The biggest ism, myself, if there are any isms that I've potentially seen, is at least what smacks of that cronyism. Why? You get those big developers, the too big to fails, where we say, well, you know what, the economic development, usually a speculative economic development impact, it's gonna be so great that we wanna go ahead and put our rules aside, give them this waiver, give them that exemption. They're there. They're definitely there. I've seen businesses never take off from the conversation stage. There's a reason among the development community in the city, and I've been away for 6 years, but there's been a reason they've always called the HARB district, not the historic or the historical district, but the hysteric district. There's a reason. And yes, there's a little bit of a humor there, but you gotta laugh so that you don't cry. I love HARB and its preservation aspects, but again, as crazy as this might sound, I like them when they're their staunchest. Never forget, as council, you can approve or you can reject their recommendations. And the door's open both ways, respectfully. You can attend the meetings as well. So we don't just have to have HARB come here. We can go ahead and attend their meetings and participate at that point in the process as well. I know it's a discussion that continues to repeat. One thing hammered something home for me, though. If the disclosure is made that you're buying in the overlay district, under HARB's rules, that could potentially sink a sale. What does that tell you? That underscores how much we cannot wave away the barrier to entry in those districts, and what does it really mean for us as a community? Who can purchase there, who can stay there, and who's there that will potentially, inevitably be displaced? It's conversations you should at least have. You should at least have going forward, not just when you have a flashpoint, when one of the big developers wants to do something that we think may or may not be beneficial, because there's many others, and not just residential uses, that fall straight through the cracks. Many times you haven't heard of them.
All right, sorry, I don't want to delay things and expand upon things any more than we need to, but just a point just for education. There is more than just the HARB district. There's also the National Register district, and Craig knows this well. There's an eastern expansion, there's a Frogtown area, so there is much more than just the city ordinance HARB, those 30 blocks kind of downtown, but there's much more. And when people go after federal money, Cdbg money, for example, to demolish a property like the RDA recently did, they have to get state approval to demolish some of these properties. I say this because the redevelopment authority is getting ready to demolish 2 properties on South Penn Street that are adjacent to each other. They happen to be in the eastern or western expansion area of the National Registry Historic District. So we had to go to the state. The RDA had to go to the state Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission and seek approval in order to use federal money to demolish an historic contributing structure. As part of that, we negotiated a memorandum of understanding between the RDA, PHMC, that requires the redevelopment authority in the next 6 months, I believe, to establish in their inventory list an additional column that denotes whether or not that property is in one of the National Historic Registry areas so that owners are aware of it, and to also create a website that provides resources to individuals on how to fix historic properties. So as I started to look through all of this, I realized the HARB section of the city's website has a lot of great resources. We already have it out there, but we just don't know that it exists. We don't do a good job of promoting that. So we really, as a community, and I've gone up against HARB and I've supported them and opposed them in some of the projects that I've done. And one thing that I suggest you could consider is if, and maybe HARB would even consider this, is you can do a conditional approval that you have some sort of abatement program or some sort of way to recognize what was once there. If you go to the stadium, you'll notice, I think there's 20 some little placards that say what used to be here. And when I was a developer, the project manager for the stadium, that was because we tore down Court Street. And the state said, this is an important asset, and you must somehow recognize this by putting a plaque or something that recognizes here. So just a suggestion that you could say, yeah, we would support this if you did something to recognize it. And in fact, at the stadium, we printed up, I think, 10,000 brochures and had to have them available to educate the public what used to be there and tell the story of the neighborhood that was demolished for the stadium. So just some information.
Since this was mentioned and the ARPA Bible is back there. I know Mr. Zumborn also mentioned about a grant in the past. Does anybody recall that grant? Just, I mean,
Yeah,
anybody
it was like a $12,000 grant. That was a supplement from $14,000. That was a supplement from PHMC. I do not know what. In Historic York used to submit the grant on behalf of the city of York. When Mayor Bracy made that change to JMT, I don't know if they continued to do that.
I think that's when it dried.
That's when it got eliminated. So I'm not sure if that is something. I mean, that's something that we can discuss as we try to figure out how we're moving forward, either with a contractor or internally.
Did you call for a reason, or you just wanted an answer to that question?
Everything. What was your thoughts?
Well, okay, so there are historic grants around, period. And I just have never known whom to ask. If I write, am I writing for HARB, or am I writing for the city? I mean, who am I writing for? Because they're major historic, everybody's into history right now. And so, that's probably a clarification I would need to figure out, but it's not a difficulty. As we talk about ARPA, I have presents for all of you. You have your own little ARPA Bible. And so I wanted to give these to you so you can know certain things. It has the final rule. It has the comments for the final rule. It has it doesn't have expenditure categories because you have those already. And then it has our report that we submitted, our quarterly report, and something else. I figured if I gave you this wonderful binder, you can just add stuff to it.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you with the ARPA Bible. So would it be an eligible expense?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that was a very informative discussion for Harb. Thank you for attending our meeting.
Thank you.
All right, we will move on to Economic and Community Development, and I will turn it over to Vice President Washington.
Thank you. We will now open discussion on, first up is the Racp grant application in the amount of $1.5 million for the Laurel Fire Station Historic and Life Safety Renovations Project. I believe we have our Director of Economic and Community Development, Nona Watson, and we also have Blanda Nates here from Economic Development.
Thank you very much. This is the city, and I know I'll get this question because I was asked it twice today by two different people in this room already. The city received two Racp grants, one of which is for $1.5 million for Laurel renovations. The other one is $1.5 million for Penn Market renovations. The Penn Market renovation grant was awarded to the Redevelopment Authority since they own that building. The Laurel Fire Station Rehab Grant was awarded to the city. Both of those projects, I'm currently writing the what is called the application and business plan for a Racp grant application. It's a 23-section document that explains the economic impact, the community impact, has the budget of the renovations, the schedule. It's a very, very technical document. One of those 23 sections is a resolution to file by the entity. So this is simply a document that City Council is authorizing the submission of the application and business plan to the Commonwealth. And I will ask the Redevelopment Authority to pass a similar one at their meeting on June 15th. That will be similar to this, obviously different recitals in the beginning, but that will authorize the Redevelopment Authority to file the application and business plan for the Penn Market grant. Simple as that.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Blanda? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I would like to make a motion to move this to the June 7th, 2022 agenda.
Second.
It's only members of the
Oh, sorry.
ECCD committee. Second.
Okay, that's first and seconded, and the members of that community are Washington, Walker, and Buckingham. All in favor of moving this to the June 7th meeting, say yes.
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 Opposed, no.
Moving right along, we have up next for committee discussion, the 2022 CDBG and home budget amendment.
Good evening, Council. James
Good
Crosby.
evening.
James Crosby from the Bureau of Housing Services. Basically, what's happening is we're amending the budget to show what our actual allocations are for this particular year. The original plan was submitted using a guesstimate. So we recently received our actual allocations for CDBG and for home. Our actual allocation for home, for CDBG was $1,421,140.
Say that again, James.
$1,421,140 is our actual allocation for the year. We planned it at, what was it? I believe 1.5 million. So we received a decrease of about $100,000. For home, we received an increase of about $42,000. So we're looking pretty good there. Our actual home allocation is $588,243.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
I might as well stand here.
Yes.
Haynes, did you
yes.
say that that was, that the home was 588-243?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I make a motion to move this forward to our June 7th, 2022 agenda.
Second.
All in favor, yes?
Yes.
Opposed?
Next up on our agenda is the COVID-19 Annual Action Plan Amendment.
Okay, we received these funds back in 2019, 2020. When we actually did the plan, we had a recipient or a potential recipient, for $60,000 of the Cdbg COVID funding, and that person was associated with the program. It's About Change.
We're not there for that one yet. This is the,
COVID-19 action plan?
yes.
Oh,
that-
there's a different part of that, yes.
Oh.
He's talking about.
Oh, okay.
amendment.
I apologize, Mr. Crosby.
You threw me off there. This is our COVID-19 annual action plan. Our COVID-19 annual action plan. We had like $60,000 like laying around, waiting for approval from HUD for one of the potential subrecipients. One of the potential subrecipients is led by our controller. So we had to submit a conflict of interest disclosure to HUD to see if there was an to see if there was a conflict of interest. There wasn't. So that $60,000 now is being pledged to her particular program. It's About Change.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Does anyone have any questions?
Can you give us the specifics of how that $60,000 will be used by the program?
It'll be used for salaries. It'll be used for case management, some supportive services. I don't have the budget in front of me.
Okay.
But if you'd like to see the budget, I'll gladly provide it for you.
Okay, no, I just wanted to, it was just general, and I just wanted some ideas. So salaries and case management and,
Supportive services.
and that mission of that, of the program is reentry for incarcerated persons, community reentry.
Community reentry.
Thank you.
Do we have any other comments or questions from council?
The only comment is it took quite a while to hear back.
Oh, it was
It took
a very long time. As a matter of fact, we have one there right now that we haven't heard back from.
Do we have any comments or questions from the public? Okay. I make a motion to move this to the June 7th, 2022 agenda.
Second.
All in favor, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no?
Next up, we have the 2022 Annual Action Plan Amendment for CDBG Home.
And that's just the actual amendment to the actual plan, showing the differences in the allocation for home and for CDBG.
Thank you. Does anyone on council have any questions regarding that? Does the public have any questions or comments? I would like to make a motion to move this to our June 7th, 2022 agenda.
Second.
All in favor, yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no?
Up next, we have our budget transfer in the amount of $60,000 for the It's About Change program.
Self-explanatory. We're basically transferring the $60,000 to that particular line item.
Do we have any questions or comments from council? Do we have any questions or comments from the public? I would like to make a motion to move this to the June 7th, 2022 agenda.
Second.
All in favor, yes?
Yes.
Opposed, no?
Next, we have a budget amendment, ARPA funding, Habitat, $500,000, RDA Blight, $550,000, PMIs, $88,000. And would that be Kim? Or?
James Van Meter and Steve.
She stayed up here.
Crosby show.
Funny guy, Blandon. Okay, what you guys like to know? We have a project on Chestnut Street. I'm sure you guys remember there was a fire there some years back, and Habitat is replacing the homes there, with affordable housing, as we speak. For the $500,000, we initially funded the project, 6 townhomes with $500,000 from the Department of Economic and Community Development. There has since become a gap in financing due to increased costs of materials due to COVID. So there's a gap in financing right now. So, we are requesting these ARPA funds to fill the gap so that we can complete the work that we're doing there now. Any unused funds that we're applying to this portion of the project would be, Habitat is asking that they apply to phase 3 of the project. We're in phase 2 of the project right now. I have my good friend Terry here from Habitat. Just because she'd like to say anything. No? Enough said.
Thank you. Does anyone on council have any questions for
Yes.
Mr. Crosby?
Yes, I do. How many families, I do have questions. How many families is this going to benefit?
Hi, I'm Terry Abersees.
Terry.
I'm Family Services and Office Manager of York Habitat.
I'm sorry, Terry, say your last name again.
Abersees, you want me to spell it?
That would be
A-B-R-U-Z-Z-E-S-E.
I didn't get any of that, but I'll get it from you.
There will be 14 families served in that block.
I just have a hard time with giving, and you guys do great work. Please don't. 14 families, $500,000, when there's other organizations in our city that are in need of $500,000 to be able to serve a lot more people. And it's just as simple as that.
Well, it's not 14 individuals, it's 14 families who have been
Understood.
struggling and trying to make it in this world.
A lot of people are struggling. It's COVID.
That's right, absolutely.
A lot of people are struggling.
Absolutely.
And so we're assisting 14 families to purchase a home. And while I'm not belittling that, I think $500,000 can go a longer way by serving more people than just 14 families in our community. And that's my opinion.
Do we have any other comments or questions from council?
For me, it's just more of a comment. So I'll need more information and history in regards to the city's role with Habitat. I know that you mentioned that we did supply or fund 500K in the past. I'm not informed or updated in regards to our roles and what we're doing with this. So I would like more information. Come on. It's home funding that came through the city. Right.
Yeah, it's
That's
home
what
funding
yes.
from the Department of Economic and Community Development was the original funding source. The city basically stepped in and applied for this grant on behalf of Habitat. So, like to be honest with you, I mean, we're like on the hook for $500,000 right now. If we don't, if for some reason this project isn't completed, then DCED is going to be asking us, the city, to refund their $500,000.
So how did we get into that position?
What?
That we're on the hook for this?
We applied for it on their behalf.
Okay.
I can
What's
give
the,
you, I
what's
can,
the timeline?
Timeline for completion of the project, or
When you're saying we're on the hook, what time frame are we working with?
I mean, if the project isn't completed, I think we are scheduled to complete the project in 2023.
Okay.
So are we talking about altogether $1 million?
Yes,
Okay.
which is really, which is really not unheard of in the affordable housing business. If I don't have the actual per subsidy layering number in front of me right now, but HUD says something like $225,000 a house. So that's what we're working with.
And what was the initial amount requested in the fall? Do you know what the initial amount requested for ARPA funding was?
$500,000.
It was 500, okay, the same amount.
Is it possible to provide us with a budget
Sure.
for the 500,000?
Yes.
Where the funds will be spent at? Thank you.
We can come up budget sources and uses, that sort of thing, if you'd like to see it.
I had a couple additional, just to respond to Councilman Rivera. Two things. One, the COVID inflation is really what happened to the project. So it's the exact same thing that's happening to projects all over the place, is that suddenly the costs went up 20 to 25%. Is that accurate? I don't remember what the entire project cost is.
Well, we figured on over 200,000, but way before that, it was below 200,000 before COVID. So
Per unit.
per unit.
Okay, so $2.8 million project, and you see a 20% increase in costs, that's your $500,000. The other thing is that this is not to purchase homes, this is to build homes. So when we say that we have a housing shortage, it's that we are short of structures. So they are contributing to the structures, the fabric of the city, and replacing an entire block that burnt down in a horrible fire. So I'm definitely fully in support of this. It does cost, in the city of York, it costs $225,000 or $200,000 to build a new home. And when you're done, it's usually worth about $125,000 or $150,000. With the market going up, maybe it's getting better now. But the reason we don't have a lot of infill development, and the reason why Habitat for Humanity is such an incredible partner, is because they come in where traditional developers are not filling the need. We have had very few, if any, well, we have had very few from scratch builds that were in the general market, that were not somehow subsidized or something else. So they're fulfilling a major need for the people of the city of York.
And this falls under the same standard habitat guidelines that these, the folks actually pay a mortgage. And they're actually putting in the hours, they donate the hours in the build. It's the same formula.
At 0% interest.
Right. Right.
And just one, I'm sorry, just one other thing to add. This was the original $500,000 was not out of our original allocation. This came from a state allocation of money set aside. So it's not like we gave them $500,000 of our home allocation. They came to us and said, look at this pile of money over here. And James, I don't know if we've ever utilized that pile of money before. No. We had never utilized this. Habitat brought us this idea and said, hey, if the city will just sign on this, we could potentially get $500,000 of free money. In addition, and because of the ramifications of COVID, we did find ourselves in a position that now it behooves us to contribute some of our money that we got from the federal government. Again, no local taxpayer dollars at all involved in this.
So if council doesn't raise the $500,000 or approve this, so what happens? Where do you get your $500,000 from?
I guess, what, are you going to give us some half-built property? We're going to try and claim that they owe us money, and then we're going to have to pay $500,000 back to the state, or else we're all going to, we're all going to feel bad about things. We're going to try to talk the state out of, I guess that's the first thing. We try to talk the state out of demanding the money. We'll see how well that works. Didn't work real well. Didn't work with Crispus Attucks here recently. Didn't work recently when we tried to do it. So that's probably not going to work. So yeah, it's just going to create a lot of bad blood, and we are not going to get houses for people that need houses. Oh, and it might impact future funding for the city of York.
Well, that's what I was just going to address. I mean, now Habitat is entering into the Racp program, which is a residential tax abatement program. So you have to kind of take the long vision here. But we've been working with Habitat on their assessments as they get the properties built, and they've been coming in at 140,000. I mean, they're high assessments. So these new homeowners' tax bills are going to be $6,000 a year. So 14 properties at $6,000, that's $840,000 annually of tax revenue that this block is going to, now that's city, county, and school districts, but long-term, from a tax revenue, it makes sense.
Good point, Blanda, but it's only 84,000. You moved the decimal point.
Okay, still.
84,000.
Okay,
But we still
so
get
do the
paid
math.
back. We get paid back in 5.5 years.
Sure, right, that's exactly right, yeah.
So
Well,
my
10
question
years,
is,
8
if
years
there
from
are
now,
no ARPA funds, where is the $500,000 coming from?
Guess the general, taxpayers? General fund. We'll have to come up with it.
I just have an ARPA question. Mr. Crosby, you said that any funds that are not used, if they're ARPA funds, they have to come back. So I just making sure I understood it, and I probably was wrong.
Well, they could come back, or we could use them for phase 3 of the project.
If you use them for phase 3 of the project, you will need to do another resolution for phase 3. Because it's different, it's just ARPA rules. We can't just roll in a project into another project if the resolution just states Habitat for Humanity for these homes. So whatever's left over, when I say comes back, we would need to know the number to make another resolution so that we would be able to, and the feds have a track of what was done for building and what this other money was used for phase 3. That's it.
That's fine, I'm sure.
And just to let everyone know, the current draft of the ordinance does just state that it's for the purpose of additional financing for the Habitat for Humanity Chestnut Street housing project. It's not specific to a phase. So if that needs to be added, please advise.
Are there any other comments or questions from council? Any other comments or questions from the public? Okay. I make a motion to move this. Oh, yeah, that's right. We have the RDA. Thank you, Council President. We do have on that as well, RDA blight. Would that be Blanda?
So are we putting all these together?
They're all one.
And as we are suggesting edits, Kim, I will remind you that Nona oversees the Department of Economic and Community Development. It is DECD in York. It's DCED in Harrisburg. So, so the blight, and we had some discussion with council about this $550,000 and a potential budget for that. In the initial round of applications, I'm aware that the Redevelopment Authority applied for $400,000 for blight activities, and also, I think it was actually $415,000, and then there was a second application for $535,000 for blight acquisition, which included some staffing. I have developed for the RDA a complete blight program that we've discussed in the past. It's like $2.8 million. I think this is a great start to acquisition of blighted properties. I will want to make clear, and Director Watson and I met a little bit today about this as well. I want to make this clear that this is money that's going to the Department of Economic and Community Development, not money going directly to the RDA. And part of our discussion was that the breakdown of this 550 some of it would apply to consultant or additional staff to assist with blight efforts. We've got 75 properties that are blighted through the city's blight process. The RDA doesn't come into play until it's time to actually acquire the properties through single property taking and eminent domain. So everything leading up through that. And our thought process is, can this be combined with the potential HARB consultant, potential Cdbg funding? Are there other ways we can pull the money together to have a blight specialist who can focus a little more heavier? If we start, we've got 29 in our pipeline now, and it's a lot of heavy lifting. And if we are going to add another, depending on the value, potentially 20 to 40 more properties to acquire, that we may need to look at some part-time staffing that would be allocated out of this money. The other thing with the budget breakdown is, I'd like to say it depends, as unfortunate as that is. Every time the Redevelopment Authority goes in and acquires a property, they have to pay the owner just compensation. Just compensation is determined by an appraisal of market value of that property. As the market has increased, so has the comparable properties that you're comparing this property to. So properties that the Redevelopment Authority used to buy for $5,000 to $15,000 are now $32,000 to, we just got one done, $38,000. So the prices are variable depending on obviously the condition of the property and the value of it. So it's hard to say, we will acquire 5 properties at $5,000 and 10 properties at $15,000 when we just don't know. And so the city staff prioritizes the blight. And Cherie and I currently work on taking the properties to the Planning Commission, the Blight Task Force, the Vacant Property Review Committee, each of who certify a property as blighted, which are all city functions. The last step is that it goes to the Redevelopment Authority for its concurrence that it's certified as blighted. And we prioritize those properties, obviously based on the condition, but also based on the neighborhood complaints and you can't take them all right now, all at the same time. So there is a little bit of internal prioritization that happens. So I would like to give you a breakdown budget, by dollar, but to be honest, it depends.
Glenda, so with those comments that you made, that means that under that section 2, if that were the case, then we would need to change the language, because the language says amending the fiscal year 2022 city budget for, should say economic and community development to fund blighted property acquisitions. It doesn't mention staffing or anything like that in there.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I think it would be blight remediation or blight efforts or blight elimination, and not limit it so much just to acquisition. And our thought process here is that we would do it similarly to what we do with the CDBG. We do have CDBG entitlement money for acquisitions that goes from the city to the redevelopment authority. And the way that process works is the redevelopment authority, after its acquisition, submits a letter of intent through the Bureau of Housing Services to be reimbursed for the acquisition of, so the money that they spent to acquire it, they're reimbursed through CDBG money. And I think we would set this up very similarly, that it would be transferred over to the RDA after they've made that acquisition.
Does anyone on council have any questions or comments for Blanda regarding Section 2? Does anyone from the public have any comments or questions regarding Section 2? Yes, sir.
Manuel Gomez, still a resident, City of York. Few questions. It brings to mind, does the RDA, city staff, administration, anybody, presuppose some sort of big ticket acquisition or condemnation in the pipeline? I'm not sure. $550,000 is not a huge sum of money in today's world, and what the dollar's worth is still a pretty penny. This is a one-time cash injection we're getting in these COVID funds. I'm not sure what this would be slated for. What's the feasibility of potentially attaching stipulations or some sort of rider to anything such as this, where you would actually call for some sort of disposition strategy? I'm big on the RDA's disposition side of the equation, rather than their constant searching and probing for acquisition. I hear more about acquisition. They store these properties in their land bank. How do we actually dispose of them? That's what I want to hear more about. It actually had me excited for a moment because Blanda's teased a little bit about what they're thinking for disposition, and I'm always on the edge of my seat for that, so maybe I don't constantly rain on the RDA parade, but I don't hear much about disposition. I'm more focused on that side of the equation rather than the many other aspects that could take us down the rabbit hole. If you see, I'm not a big fan of the speculative aspects of what the RDA is actually going to do. What are they really planning? I know there's not much they can do outside of what the RDA is empowered to do. That's sort of what keeps it, in my view, spinning its wheels. And you wonder where are you going to point at something the RDA did and say, finally, they knocked it out of the ballpark. That's a pun for you guys, by the way. But I'm still waiting, so to speak, because I'm more on the disposition side of things. I know I'm a biased observer, but trust me, I'm not the only one.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I just wanted to say that I had a conversation earlier with Blanda. One of the things that we are trying to do is separate out who's doing what, whether it's RDA or economic development, and to make sure that Blanda is not wearing two hats. RDA taking it off economic development. So we did have that conversation today, and I totally agree with what you're saying. So what we like to see happen is if they acquire on the economic development side, that we partner and we come up with that strategy in reference to housing. We have a Bureau of Housing. We have economic development that falls under Department of Economic and Community Development Code. So we need to devise a plan to actually deal with whether it's home ownership and all of that. So that's what we are actually working on. So he's absolutely right that needs to happen. So right now for tonight, this is the acquisition piece. Correct, Blanda? And then we're going to work together on the plan. I would like to see a home ownership plan. I would also like to just say, in reference to Terry, I had an opportunity to go over there on Chestnut Street and actually interview them, that project that they were doing. Home ownership is so important. Affordable housing is so important. I myself am looking for a place, whether it's an apartment or a house to stay, and even with my salary, like all during last week, I was looking, and it was difficult. And so we need affordable housing here in the city. So I don't think it's really a matter of this or that. It's a matter of how can we get it all. how can we find the grants? How can we tap into the finances that are available out there for us? So I just wanted to say that we are working on the whole plan through economic and community development.
Thank you, Ms. Watson.
Yeah, I wanted to add just a quick comment. There was a report given recently about the properties that are owned by the RDA, and out of approximately 260, I'm going to say, 228, and close to 200 of those are vacant lots?
114.
Oh, I thought we were up in the two.
No, 113 vacant lots.
Okay, but 8 properties. Can you please share with us so that the public can actually hear the numbers you're dealing with, because there are incredible stories about new home ownership through the RDA that are not really coming to light. They don't do a good job advertising, I think, and usually when there is a property taken, or when there is a property sold, there has to be a plan of how you are going to how it is going to be developed or disposed of.
Yeah. Quite frankly, one of my biggest challenges from an economic development standpoint and housing standpoint is how do you build affordably? I mean, we just heard it's $140,000 to $200,000 to build a new home. The RDA currently owns 113 vacant lots. That means we mow 113 vacant lots. We do as best as we can. We try to mow. There's snow removal. That's money that's taken out of our federal Cdbg stabilization money. So we're constantly spending this. So we're always trying to reach out to the neighbor and say if they want a bit larger yard or more parcel. But of our inventory, and the mayor was close, we have 220. The RDA has 228 parcels in its inventory. And the interesting thing is when you start looking at some of that, one of them is a facade easement on Family First Health across the street. So now we're down to 227. One of them is a railroad line over on George Street. So now we're down to 226. So as you start chipping away at the oddball properties, we own the police station parking lot. So that, things like that are just a little bit odd. There are 35 lots that are used by gardens, by Annalisa or Hope Street Learning Lab. Those are all RDA-owned properties. So there are things out there. There are 9 parking areas, some for neighborhoods where the neighbors just park, and the RDA owns that land. Back behind Newton Square, the RDA owns 2 or 3 properties. Over on Green Street, the RDA owns some parking areas. A parking garage. Out of those 228 parcels, the RDA actually has title to the Susquehanna Commerce Center parking garage because it was part of their bond issuance when it was built. So it's a little bit of a misnomer. And I was guilty as before I came to the city and got in really involved into the weeds. The story out in the community is like, well, the RDA owns 300 properties and they don't know what to do with them. And that's not necessarily true. Right now there are 11 structures that are owned, one of which is Salem Square Library, one of which is Penn Market. There are 7 homes out of those structures that are for sale, and we have this whole list on the website for the RDA property list. Probably one of those properties, 334 South Duke, is probably the best of the properties that is owned right now. 116 Lafayette. There's one in the 200 block of Prospect. All of these properties, not all of them, most of these properties will require someone to spend $80,000 to $90,000 to make that property worth 70. They're upside down. So the RDA did get a grant from the state last year of $200,000, and they're developing specs right now to go out to bid to fix these properties, kind of vanilla box them, but fix the roof, get in a good subfloor, make them safe so that they could be sold then to somebody who doesn't have to spend and be upside down immediately. So that's the current progress right now. But the number of homes that the RDA is sitting on in their land bank, really it's 7 properties. And a lot of them are in really, really, really bad shape that people have looked at them and have walked away. There are 8 structures to be demolished. The RDA just received funding from the County Land Bank Authority. Just got the email about it last month. 725 and 727 Court Street will be demolished this year, and 450, 452, and 454 Wallace Street will be demolished. And I mentioned earlier 236 and 238 South Penn Street. So that's on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 structures. We are currently finishing up demolition on 557 West Clark Avenue, which will become a vacant lot in the middle of a block. But the RDA is putting stone down because that block is very difficult for parking right now, and we know residents need a place to park. Somebody may want to buy it and fence it off and make it their own parking lot, but for now the RDA is saying community needs a place to park, that's where they're going to park. So the philosophy of the RDA at one time maybe was, let's land bank, let's gather this, let's buy it just because. But most recently, at least since my involvement in a real intimate sense, the RDA board has been, okay, now what? If we buy it, what are we going to do with it? And most recently, we started to have open houses. So some of the houses that are safe enough to walk in, safe enough for the public to walk through, they have been open houses. Staff will go out there on Sundays, typically Sundays from 10 to 2, and we'll meet with, and I've met with some of you at some of the open houses. One was 115 Rathton Road, which was sold to someone who's redeveloping it, and they have to have it finished by this September, and they give regular updates on how their progress is going. The other one was 323 Lindbergh, where there was an open house, and it was sold actually to a guy that lived next door or behind it, and he's working now fixing it up. And I walk by on my way home and stop and talk to Juan every once in a while, and gives me updates on what he's doing. And he has, again, everybody has 3 months to start and 12 months to complete their renovations to the properties.
Was that Lindbergh address where the next one is that you called?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, God, they're best friends. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a problem.
Yeah. Well, and that was one that was prioritized because Chief called me. I think the mayor was involved as well. Homeless people were breaking in and living in the basement and starting fires to keep warm. Oh yeah, there's big trees growing up through it. So these were in rough shape. And the RDA bought that property with eminent domain, went through, broke in the house to get it appraised, paid the legal fees. All told, the RDA had about $18,000 in that acquisition of that property, and has it under agreement of sale for $20,000. So through all those efforts, the RDA makes $2,000. Don Hoyt charges the RDA $3,200. So,
Belanda.
So the RDA is not in a cash cow game. But
Can you go back to what you said? You said 3 months to what start, and what was the other one?
Our typical redevelopment agreement is 3 months to start construction and 12 months to complete construction. So if an owner or redeveloper wants to stack those back to back, they could take 15 months to get something completed, with regular updates to the redevelopment authority as asked. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but I think I will take pride in this. I've done a good job steering the RDA in the right direction of eliminating. Their goal is to eliminate themselves and not have to exist anymore. Long term, 20 years from now, there's no blight, there's no need to get rid of all these properties. But anyway.
Thank you, Blanda.
Yep.
I thought you had a I wasn't going to say anything, but I will say just for the public so that council members, some of us have been meeting with Mr. Black and Mr. Nace. And Mr. Black is the chair of the RDA over this past month, just to further the relationship. When you don't have communication, you don't know what's going on. And so my last question for when the blight portion was mentioned at our last meeting was just more of a plan. So we know about the acquisition, but my concern is, as Director Watson brought up, is the home ownership, and how do we make sure that individuals within our community are at the forefront to become homeowners. And so what does that look like? So that's something that I look forward to working on and getting answers for in regards to the strategy after acquisition from the RDA and how it further develops economic and community development.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions regarding Section 2? Okay, we'll move along to Section 3. And that involves 2 additional property maintenance inspectors. I don't know if that will be Stephen Buffington. Yes, it would be.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We applied for ARPA funding initially for 3 additional inspectors, and through back and forth and reevaluating, we've got that to 2 inspectors, which will allow us to get 2 more sets of eyes out on the street. I don't know whether council members have noticed the city doesn't look as pretty and clean as it could. So we need to get more eyes out on the street, start addressing these things. This will also allow us to start to address demolition by neglect. These folks will be more generalists than specialists, like the current PMIs are. We want these folks to be cross-trained over the various areas so that when we have long-term illnesses, when we have somebody out for whatever reason, we have a cork to stick in that hole to try and keep things moving along. So this will give us a much-needed increase in capacity and be able to maintain continuity as things happen throughout the years with your employees, as they do all the time.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on council?
How many inspectors do you have now?
We currently have 4 patrol inspectors and 5 inspectors that we're using for tenant occupied, I believe.
So it's 10.
I'm sorry?
10, including you?
That does not include me.
So
Yeah,
a total of 9?
yes.
Okay.
And we're actually, right now, we're not up to full staff. We're short a few positions, but we're in the process of filling them now.
Any other council members have any questions or comments?
None for Chief Buffington, but in regards to ARPA, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
In regards to ARPA, to date, over the past couple of months, how much has been expended? That can go to BA or?
Okay, so I'm asking, so how much has been expended? Nothing except the HRC still. So it's the $197,000. We haven't expended any funds. The training they will have to go through is next Thursday. I've had a couple of meetings, but we have not given out any money that I have known about. Unless I did, unless they, I don't know. But I have, there's
Well,
not.
I mean, are you talking about business administration or?
Oh, when I say, I don't think anybody, usually I get to, a business administration will tell me if they're gonna do something. My department will inform me if they're gonna do something ARPA-wise. And there has not been any checks cut, ACHs, or anything.
Why?
Oh, okay, so, I'm sorry. We have to get them trained. Oh, we're using OpenGov as the tool that they're going in to make their applications. Just like I had one of the police officers called me today, and he said, Miss Baldwin, do you know when I go in to do the application, I have to do community engagement, I have to give you a 1-year budget, I have to give you a community plan, I have to do this, that, and the third. Am I on the right page? Yes. So until those things need to be done for ARPA, there's no way we could give any money out. to anyone. We shouldn't be unless we know exactly what they are doing. Just like when I asked and stated that resolution would need to be something different, because when they look at that resolution or they go back into the audit and anything over $750,000 gives us an audit alert, then we need to make sure that they are doing the right things for us. In your binders, you will find your calendar, you'll find the, Blanda, would you assist me in helping me? Thank you. I appreciate it. They have their names on it. So that we can actually, there are some things they have to do before we can write a check.
You want me to hand them out to them?
Would you mind?
Oh, no.
Thank you.
So Melanie,
Yes, ma'am.
do they need to fill out the application before they're trained, or is that part of the training?
It's both. So if you come to the training because you know you're going to be funded, you can do the training first. But the application is not something that, thank you. The application is not something that is easy. It's because we're just dealing with money. One of the things that one of the recipients said, I gave you a budget. You gave me a budget for 5 years. How are you going to use it the first year? So we need to know what all of the eligible expenses and uses in the first year, not in just, the whole thing. So they can, the application is online. People have gotten letters. They got their letters on Monday. Who was eligible to, and you all have confirmed that the money is going to pass to them and things of that nature. So they are very much aware of what they're supposed to do. They're going to go online. They're going to create an account if they do not have one already, and they have to answer the questions. And then after that, we get trained in OpenGov of how to put your own information in. One of the things that they will also learn is when the calendar is ready. They'll get the same calendar we've given to you, because they have to give a report to me 2 weeks before I have to give it to the feds. And so we are in compliance totally at this present time. And that in the back of the last file will be the first quarter report, and that's all we've spent so far.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Oh, vehicle lease. Isn't there a vehicle lease? Isn't that the same?
No, there's a vehicle in here.
There's a vehicle lease in here.
Yeah, vehicle/lease.
Right.
Vehicle lease or purchase, yes. What about it?
So, okay.
Yeah, so that's approval that can happen as well.
So it's the application, then it's the training.
Either or. Either or, because some people won't get their application until you guys tell me who's next and what they need to do. As soon as you tell me who they are, I'll start sending out the letters, and I can train them myself because OpenGov is coming in to train the first set. But there's no movement until they finish the application.
So of the monies that we have already allocated,
Yes, ma'am.
how many of those people have been trained? How many of those groups?
None. It's a salary. It was nobody's been trained in that. It was I will have to train, I guess, because it's a salary position, and I have to figure out what the metrics are for that position, but no one's been trained. No one was new to train, first of all, and then no one understood that we were supposed to train, in the sense of me telling them before I give out any money, and when I say I don't mean Melanie, I mean the city gives out any money. These are the parameters you have to understand. So they came to the meeting and they have their manual. I don't know if I gave you guys the manual, has procurement in it and what they have to do, and it has a subrecipient agreement, and they have to sign it, and I keep a copy in their file. If all of these things do not happen, they will not get any funds.
So we're just talking about the HRC.
Yes.
When you say salary, so we're not even addressing
Yes, ma'am.
the other money that was approved by council
The
over the past couple
HRC
months.
they have a person working. I have to sit down with the gentleman because they changed people. And so I need to find out when his availability is and invite him to the June meeting so he can train. It's a salary, it's not anything, I don't think they're having missions or visions, or I have to look, to be very honest. I have not looked at what he does.
For clarification, what it is that, of course, the HRC money was the only money that, for ARPA that was approved with the initial budget that council approved. So obviously we have positions in place, so that money is being used for salaries and as it was allocated in the budget. What Ms. Baldwin is explaining is that she has set up a system for reporting. And that's where she wants to make sure she has all the pieces in place in terms of the information she needs to initially establish what the money's for, and then to also keep track of how we're reporting the use of the money so that when we have to report back to the federal government, we have the information. So what is happening is that it was determined that before we, even to the police department, allow them to spend the money in their budget, she wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page using the same tool in terms of inputting their information and then periodically on a schedule providing her with the updates that she needs. So that's what she's explaining in terms of an application. It's them starting their file for reporting purposes. So what was determined is that Ms. Baldwin wanted us to make sure we had all those pieces in place before any requisitions were approved for payment.
But, so the police department's been trained?
The police department has their application to be trained. I will see them next Thursday, June 2nd, at either 10 or 6, whoever is going to be inputting their data or whoever is going to be managing that data, or both. So their program manager, because they have to input information into the system. Either way, whoever's coming, they will be trained. Once they are trained, once they're approved to go ahead and move in the budget's complete, the applications complete, our purchases are the same. So our purchases, they have to tell me what the purchase is for, when they're going to start using it, and how long. It's 2 different forms, but they still have to tell me what they still have to apply. So they're approved because you approved them, but they have to apply to use the money.
And these are pretty much the steps that you explained at one of the other meetings.
Yes, it is.
From what I'm understanding, right?
Yes, ma'am. And ARPA, I'm going to say this, ARPA is not difficult if you understand the parameters that are supposed to happen. It's just a matter of having the parameters to happen and not getting phone calls at 7 o'clock in the morning. I need my money. When can I get it?
No, I do appreciate, you gave us that flow chart, but my question is, where are the internal departments?
Yes.
Where are they actually at? So
In the
for
beginning.
what we have approved, are there point persons that are going to be assigned to attend the training?
They are assigning their own point persons. Before, in the police department, before Captain Akey, he came and their chief of staff, Officer Lentz, came, and they're like, oh, we're going to do them. We're going to just do them. And then the phone call was back, we can't do all this. And so what I am attempting to let people understand is that it is a consistency that has to happen. There are metrics you have to follow. Because on your report, one of the 6-month impact report, they talk about what cities have done. And so it's important that we want our name in the one of the books. I plan for us, at least by the end of the year, to have a newsletter of the projects we've completed. I want to make sure that we have that information. And so they will be getting trained on the 2nd with everybody who's new. And then after that, whenever the training needs to happen, I can do it personally or I can do it in a group. And still have a life. Yes.
And so with this procedure that's in place.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So once it still seems like things are trying to at least be smoothed out.
Yes.
For internal departments, estimated, how long would it take from a resolution being passed for final passage and amending the budget to actually expending funds?
Okay, so the finance part gets strange because I can't approve. So after they have taken care of the application or whatever, I send it over to BA and then the finance department. I have been talking to Ms. Deneen, and we want to try to get them within 5 business days after they finished, but I don't know if that's realistic. So if you approve something this month, I want to make sure they have it by next month in one of the meetings. That's my reality. Because the only person who's taking up the time to complete the application is them. Because they can do whatever. I mean, you could stay up all night and do it, and I can just approve you. But it has to be done that way so we can just make sure the money is being equitably distributed. And very much accountable.
So for this resolution.
Yes, ma'am.
That's being proposed.
Yes, ma'am.
There would be habitat, there would be RDA blight, there would be PMI.
Yes.
It all falls under our economic and community development.
Yes.
Department. Would there be a separate point of contact for each of these?
Yes. The police department has 2 subrecipients because technically DC or DE? DECD is a host for the other groups. So if they host the RDA, then they are the host. They need to know what the subrecipient needs to do. And people for something and somebody else are for the police department, they have to come in and get trained and they have to sign a subrecipient agreement as well. So even though we may be the pass-through, even with Habitat for Humanity, we have to, because we're using ARPA funds, they don't have, I guess they're not filling out an application. I'm gonna just figure that one out myself. But they still have
Who's
to.
not?
Habitat for Humanity.
There we already got, what?
Excuse me?
No, I think they would. They would.
We already have an application. It was approved by the advisory group. Yeah, I'm not sure where you're going.
The advisory group they approved the applications. If you were to go into OpenGov at this present time, it will say 2022 ARPA application, and it's just for them to tell what they were going to be doing and when they will have it done. They're 2 different things.
It's an application to start the report.
Yes. There's 2 different things.
Yes, just to clarify.
Yeah.
Essentially,
Okay.
each organization needs to fulfill its grant requirements just as if they were applying directly to the federal government. That's really how it works. So we need to get, once the people are trained, once an individual in the police department is trained, there is going to be no holdup at the police department. It's all in the training right now.
Yes.
So Ms. Baldwin has been setting up a very thorough training program. It got stalled a little bit for a week or so here because of some new information that came in, correct?
Yes.
So now she's going to get people trained and we're going to get moving.
Where's the ARPA coordinator in this picture?
Exactly.
The RFP for the ARPA coordinator is being completed right now and should be out within a couple weeks.
I did the swirl. That was my Wonder Woman turn.
Thanks. So I've made it clear where I stand with the administration. I'm not supporting any more ARPA funding resolutions until a administrator or a project manager is being put in place. So I'm just letting you guys know, the public know where I stand with it.
Oh, can you repeat that? Because I think it needs to be heard.
For a repeat again, okay? I'm not supporting any potential resolutions for budget amendments for ARPA until a project manager, which we approved, I believe, back in late February or early March, until a project manager or an administrator is put into place.
I do want to apologize. What's your name again? I'm sorry. Yes. Terry. I do want to apologize.
Is your microphone
on? I'm colorblind. I can't see that green light. I do want to apologize to you. I am an admirer of Habitat for Humanity, President Carter, and all the work that he and the Habitat for Humanity team has done throughout their history. So this is not a reflection on you personally. It's just my opinion. So I felt I came off a little strong with my opinion. You guys do great work. I just think that $500,000 can be shared by many others, especially during this COVID time. So.
Can I add something about that?
You need to come up to the mic if you want to speak.
It's not just about building the houses, it's about education. And we work with these families for 2+ years in education. I've had homeowners that say to me that I learned so much about how to deal with finances, I can now teach my children. And that's breaking the cycle of poverty. So it's not just having that stable home where they can come home and be together, but it's also about the education part so that they can start to break that cycle of poverty. And we do more than just build houses.
Understood.
So, but thank you.
Terry, can you stay up there for a second? Because I just did have one follow-up question. What is the deadline or what is the need for this cash here?
Okay. So, I mean, we have fundraised other money too. So, we're trying, but it's slow. Okay. The first, in the 6-pack, so we have the first 4 done. The next 6 we're working on now. We're hoping to be finished by the 6-pack by next May. It could be earlier, but right now we are dependent upon volunteers because that's who builds these houses other than the important like plumbing and roofing and stuff like that. But those 6, and then we would work on the 4.
Right, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking when you need the money.
We could use...
Not when you could use it, when do
Okay.
you need the money to complete the project? So if this isn't passed in July, but it's passed in September, does that make a difference? If it's September or October, does that make when is the deadline for the money?
I would have to check with our NRMED. I don't know.
Because that's the only comment that we have. I have no problem with Council President's position on holding off on ARPA approvals until an ARPA manager would be put in place. However, this one particular item may have a timeliness issue, and then I would ask Council to possibly reconsider. This is a long-term partner that has great familiarity with working with the federal government, Cdbg grants. I believe as soon as Ms. Baldwin has her process in place, they're going to be up and running within days. I don't think that, I think the holdup here is going to be that's not going to be a holdup, and it's not going to be anything that has anything to do with an ARPA manager. As far as the administration's asks, I'm completely comfortable and in agreement with if you want to hold off on that until we get this person in place, that's fine. I'm just worried about this project in particular.
And I will get that date.
Oh.
What's that?
Oh.
We do have a deadline for project completion.
Yes.
That's
of
what I
2023,
did
May
ask
of
that. I asked the
2023.
question
I'm
not
sorry.
too long ago. So, I mean, Mr. Crosby said 2023.
Right.
But I also said I would like more information in regards to detail. So
We
that
can
would
get you
include
details.
the budget, which Councilwoman Washington requested as well.
We can get that for you. Okay. All right.
Oops.
Oh, that's weird.
Okay, if there's,
I just wanted to make one quick comment about how important it is for us to get moving with these ARPA funds. I have over 20 years of grant management experience, and 3 years is not a long time to spend $34 million. So if we have $5 million that we have to spend for CDBG, and we're scrambling at the end of 2 and 3 years trying to meet timeliness, imagine what we're going to go through to spend $34 million. I just want everyone to keep that in mind. I think we need a schedule. I think we all need to come to the table and put together a schedule and say, by this date, we want this to happen, that to happen, boom, 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 because the majority of the time should be taken out in the community. all this time that we're taking for the administrative piece, we are about to be in trouble, or we're going to have to return some dollars. And I just wanted to say that to you all. If we can get moving on this and get, as we say, get with one accord, we need to get moving on this and spend this money. So I don't know how long it's going to take. We're saying 3 weeks out for, I don't know, what is that, posting a position? And I don't know. It's just taking too long, and we got to get moving. So I just wanted to share that.
Yes, definitely agree with that. There was a timeline that was shared. It was a general timeline, early, might have been mid-February, early March. I do believe having a manager or an administrator in place will help assist. As many have heard, there's been talk about, even when it came to residency, about how staff internally are stretched and cannot keep up, especially in business administration. So definitely agree that we need to keep this moving, but there needs to be some help.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'll make a motion to move this to the June 7th, 2022 agenda.
Second?
All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. No.
No.
It stays in committee. All right, that concludes our ECCD portion. Is there any council comment? Administration comment?
None, thank you.
Our next committee meeting is scheduled for September 28th at 6:00 p.m. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good night.